Like so many things, our language is constantly evolving. We're continually developing new ways to describe our experiences and needs, and even new ways to interact with each other linguistically. Nowhere is this more true than with insults. Here on YouTube, in the comments section of so many videos, people are coming up with new and innovative ways of deliberately causing offence. But can you imagine a world where being insulted directly impacted your success in life, your standing among your local community, and even your credit score? Well, for people living in England 400 years ago, that was the reality. Insults and foul language are a regular and common part of life. You hear them in daily conversations, in music, on television, and see them in the online content you consume. In the modern world, most offensive slurs have very different meanings and levels of impact than they would have had 100 years ago. But this doesn't mean insults weren't rife in historical societies. For instance, between the 5th and 16th centuries, insults were incorporated into English and Scottish entertainment in the form of a verbally abusive competition known as flyting. Flyting is a poetic, stylised battle of insults that was even used to amuse nobility and monarchs in the royal court. Imagine a historic rap battle, and you're not too far from the truth. One of the most famous examples of flyting is the Flyting of Dunbar and Kennedy, a battle between two poets, which features some highly creative insults like Puny, Paltry, Pigman, and your balls droop below your dress, and many more that aren't really appropriate for this video. It's well worth a read. On top of this, insults, taunts, and profanity can be found in historical poetry and plays. William Shakespeare's plays have some excellent examples, such as I do desire we may be better strangers from As You Like It, Thou art a traitor, false to thy dogs, thy brother and thy father, from King Lear, and Not Hercules could have knocked out his brains, for he had none, from Cymbeline. Many of these insults are wonderfully inventive and a lot more descriptive than common modern versions. But is there a reason for this? Well, despite the extensive use of insults in both royal and proletarian forms of entertainment, the phrase to be as good as one's word was highly applicable at this point in history. The exact wording of insults and slander in early modern England was often very calculated and could have dire consequences for the recipient. 16th century England witnessed a massive population boom. Between 1520 and 1600, the number of people living in London alone rose from 55,000 to 200,000. But as a result, jobs, resources, and land were increasingly scarce and hard to come by. Partially because of this, chains of credit were increasingly common in local English economies. And since regulated centralised loans from banks weren't a thing, it was important that every person could trust their debtors to repay their loan, even at short notice. Without a high level of trust, these vital chains of credit would not have been feasible. Insults that implied untrustworthiness or an inability to do one's job could have a devastating impact on a person's reputation among their creditors and peers. Even small insults could cause catastrophic damage to someone's life. So most people would go to great lengths to protect their reputation. This included taking neighbours to court to disprove any truth to their slander. Court records from the late 16th century provide plenty of examples of this. For instance, in one case, a woman named Joan English testified against a man named John Burton. She stated that Burton had called her uncle a thief and dog, and had said that a second person, Lou of Canterbury, was more indebted than he was worth. It's clear that both of these insults were designed to harm the reputation and credibility of both Lou and of English's uncle. Though insults like these may have little impact in our modern life, in the 16th century, it could have prevented these two men from obtaining future credit, and could feasibly have caused their current creditors to demand immediate repayment of their debt, no longer believing them to be trustworthy. Witness testimony in court was just one way to defend oneself. Another was with counter-insults. If someone succeeded in making their rival seem less reputable than themselves, their slander had little effect, and should it come to it, they stood a much better chance of scoring a ruling in their favour in court. But also, insults weren't just aimed at men. slander aimed at women could have just as devastating an effect on a household's financial credibility. But the style of insults differed. Insults aimed at women more often took a sexual form. Legally, in the 16th and early 17th centuries, women were not considered equal to men, but they were, however, still very much involved in the financing and running of the household. They made purchases, earned an income, invested money, and even entered contracts to lend and borrow money. But their level of involvement in the economy differed depending on their age, class, and position in life. When married, a woman's social and economic credit joined that of her husband. They became a single financial unit. Even though both could have independent incomes and could make independent financial decisions, the creditworthiness of one directly affected the other. But despite this seemingly equal financial footing, insults aimed at women were most often designed to attack their sexual reputation. Some examples pulled from the 16th century court records include phrases like mezzled-faced and scaled whore, pokey-nosed whore, and whore-mother. The theme here is pretty clear. These insults could damage women and their household reputations in many ways. They implied her untrustworthiness, but also that her husband was unable to sustain his home and family, that he was somehow less of a man and therefore less worthy of trust. They could even impact their children, leading to accusations of unknown parentage and legal illegitimacy. In many cases, these insults against women are about far more than they seem to be on the surface. They're a systematic attack on the woman, her husband, and their family. So while personal insults may have been much more inventive and arguably poetic in the past, they were also much more damaging to the person on the receiving end of them. With the advent of the internet, it may be easier than ever to insult someone, especially anonymously. But it's worth remembering that, like in so many other things, people in the past had it a lot worse.